This week I got to talk with Tori Eldridge about her new mystery thriller, Kaua'i Storm, and it is just fantastic. It is super fast-paced. It is hopefully about to be one in a series, and it takes place, as you may have guessed, in Kauai. After 10 years as a national park ranger in Oregon, Makalani is back on Kauai for her grandmother's birthday. Having been gone for so long, Makalani finds the disconnect with her people and her struggles have never been more profound. Neither has her need to reacquaint herself with everything she left behind. When she reaches the homestead, she finds a bickering family and the disconcerting news that her cousins, a failed college football player and a rebellious teenage girl, have gone missing. Makalani hopes they just ran off, too careless to realize the worry they've caused. But when hunters find a dead body in the Kaua'i Forest Reserve, Makalani fears something ominous is at play, and the search for her cousins grows more desperate. Although her help may not be welcomed by family and locals, Makalani is determined to solve a mystery that poses a greater risk than anyone imagines. The investigation will open her heart, reawaken her love for the land she calls home, and strengthen her bond with her family. Because no matter how long she's been away, for Makalani, Hawaii is in her blood. I had such a great conversation with Tori about how this book was a little more personal for her than her others, and the things that she enjoyed about building Makalani's world and her family and her history. That being said, let's hear from Tori. I am so excited to have Tori Eldridge here. We are going to be talking about her book, Kaua'i Storm, which was just so many things. Thrilling, educational, like all kinds of stuff that was amazing. But I can't wait to dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Tori.
Oh, mahalo. Thank you for having me, Kate.
Yeah. So the way I normally do it is I talk to you a little bit about you first so that we can kind of get to know you, and then we can kind of talk about this book specifically after that. So was there a moment for you when you were like, I want to be an author, or a moment that was like, oh, all of a sudden I want to write a book? What was your journey to that like?
There was, but it came a lot later in life than normally happens for authors, because I was like this actress, dancer, singer person in musicals and TV and film and stuff like that. And that was my focus. And then, right about the time I had my first son, I got into screenplays. And so I started writing a screenplay and expanded one of those into a novel. And oh my gosh, I loved it. But I was so into being like a full-time mom with projects. Yeah. And then I discovered the martial arts and I got way obsessive and crazy about that. So,
I love that.
I know, right? So it wasn't until 13 years after that that I was like, I have got to get back to writing. I love that so much. Yeah. And I did, and I started working on that novel that I had written, and that was going to be the project on which I learned my craft. And I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the second half century of my life. And I timed everything around my 50th birthday. I stopped teaching, training, touring for the martial arts, and I put all of my time, effort, resources, everything into becoming a novelist, and I timed it on my 50th birthday.
Wow.
I know, right?
That is cool. You're like, at this point, I'm stopping and I'm doing something different. I love that.
I've done that a number of times. Like,
okay, it sounds like a personality trait for sure.
It is. I left musicals when I was in the original First National of Cats, and I left and I moved out to LA, and I stopped acting after being on television shows and film. And my family was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, time to shift." It's time to shift.
That's good. I mean, when you need to shift.
Yeah.
So how did your writing process develop? Did you say you wrote a screenplay first?
I did. I wrote quite a few of them first. So my novel writing process takes from that, that 4-act structure, and pacing, really great pacing, and that kind of cinematic writing and layout. So that really informs a lot of the way I approach
Mm-hmm.
novels.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you approach it as like writing every day? Do you kind of write when it comes to you? How do you do that part?
I'm a real self-disciplined, everyday kind of person. I mean, that's what I did with dance, acting, singing, martial arts, everything. So when it came to writing, it was like, of
Yeah.
course. So when I said I shifted everything on my 50th birthday, in my brain, I was a full-time writer. That's what I was
Yeah.
going to do. 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, pretty much. Sometimes 7, sometimes 5. That's how I approach it.
Yeah. I love that. It doesn't surprise me from everything I'm getting to know about you. With your characters, do you typically get to know them as you write them, or do you do any like character development before you go into plot?
Ooh, good question. All of my novels begin with there's something I want to write about and there's a place. So
Mm,
I start, even if I know it really, really well. I mean, I'm born and raised in Honolulu, I'm Hawaiian. Um,
mm, mhm.
Even if I know the subject really well, I begin everything with research. And
Oh yeah.
from the research, characters and plot and story emerge. And for me, it all began with Makalani Pahukula. See, my mo'opuna, my grandkids are in Portland. That's where I live now. And so I kind of wanted that connection with Oregon, which is why I made Makalani an Oregon Ranger. And then I
Yeah.
chose Kauai because that's my favorite island. And I
Yeah.
had her coming back for her tutu's birthday. And so I knew it was going to be a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, because that's what happens in families in Hawaii, mine included. And
Mm-hmm.
so I created a genealogy,
Mm,
all starting with her tutu, her 85-year-old grandmother, and her mother, her sisters, her brothers who had
mm-hmm.
passed away. And I created this whole crazy genealogy. And so I had that in my head and on
Yeah.
paper, actually, before I began writing.
Wow. That's cool. That you really and it was so important to this story to be able to understand everyone's family connections. So that's cool that that's like kind of what solidified the characters for you.
Yeah, and I was so excited because my editor with Thomas and Mercer, she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I love your genealogy. Let's put it in the beginning of the book." So there
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is, Makalani's genealogy, which is fun, I think.
Yeah. That is so cool. I saw that somewhere you talked about how it pretty much took you writing 5 novels to feel like ready to write one in your homeland.
It's so
So
true.
what was that like for you? Like what head trash was making you think you couldn't do it?
Well, I moved away when I graduated from high school. That was a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if I write a book set in Hawaii, it cannot be like, all these wonderful mystery thrillers that are set in Hawaii. It looks so beautiful. They do a good job, but
Mhm.
if I'm going to do it, it has to be from a Kanaka Maoli perspective, a native Hawaiian perspective. It has to be authentic. It has to be looking at the issues that native Hawaiians back in Hawaii are dealing with today. It had to be a
Mhm.
book, honestly, that only a Kanaka Maoli would write. And
Mhm.
that made the distinction. Otherwise, why would I write it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it had to be that. And I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a lot. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
But after, writing the Lily Wong series, which, had my Chinese and Norwegian heritage, after writing the standalone Dance Among the Flames, which was deeply Brazilian, I was
Mhm.
like, no, I can do this. I can do this. And I
Yeah.
want to do it. And with my
Yeah.
grandkids, it was the right time to do it.
Mhm. That's cool. It just all came together and coalesced like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some social issues that you multiple that you actually do like touch on in the book. Um specifically blood quantum and land rights and how complicated, I guess is the right word for it, that can be, what like, did you feel like you needed to do a lot of research for that? Was that something you were just very familiar with already? And like, what made you want to like make sure that had its place in a thriller?
Well, you know what? One of the first things I did was I called up classmates from Punahou, the
Oh,
ones that I
nice.
knew who were, who were Hawaiian, but who were like really brought up deep in the culture. And one of my
Mm.
friends, Kaulana, I named a character after her. Her
Yeah.
family is from Kauai. And so I was talking to her about things, and she's a real activist too for the Hawaiian people. And I was saying, what are the issues? What's going on? What are you most concerned about? What do you want the world to know? What
Mm-hmm.
is the big heartache? And it was the Hawaiian homelands. It was having sovereign land, having land that was dedicated to the Hawaiian people, and then not being doled out in a way where we could get access to it easily and reasonably, and this land set aside with this idea where a third of it would be sovereign land, royal land, a third would be
Mm-hmm.
government, a third would go to the people.
Mm-hmm.
um, but it was so complicated back in the day that so many people who should have, probably my ancestors included, did not apply. So, there are
Mm-hmm.
families, that have millions of dollars worth of property that would have been in their family that don't. And
Ugh.
at the time, Prince Kuhio, who was not only, royal, but also, you know, in the Congress, and he was the
Mm.
representative for this. He was pushing for a very low blood quantum to prove that you're Hawaiian. I mean, something like, a 32nd, 1/32nd, right?
Mm.
But no, the U.S. government said no, 50%. Can you imagine any other culture? Imagine any other culture. You're not 50%. You're not that thing? Excuse me?
No.
What?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me if I'm Hawaiian enough? And so
Mhm.
imagine what that does to your family, right? Your family
Right.
tree when you start marrying somebody, I mean, there aren't a lot of full-blooded Hawaiians. So
Mm-hmm.
as you go down the family tree, we have less and less and less and less. And so
Right.
there's in some families a divide where some have enough and some don't.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the big issues.
If you're an author, chances are high that you just want to spend your time writing and maybe reading, not thinking about social media, what to create, and what to post. And the good news is, I have a solution for you. With just 3 hours of in person filming, you can receive 90 days or 3 months worth of social media content. The content is a mixture of videos, photos, edited reels, and when you receive the content, you also receive a PDF that's a content calendar that links to all of the content, tells you exactly when to post it, and gives you an option for captions. And if you've ever felt like you're tired of just talking about your book all the time, we will help you come up with ideas that are general content for your page that's not just all about your books. If you are tired of thinking about your social media presence and just want to get back to writing, check out the link in the description. Right. And it makes it so difficult to navigate those relationships, then I'm sure, like, adds extra pressure to it. And there's like the added pressure, I would assume, to like marry within your culture, even if you fall in love with someone who's not, just because like the laws are set up so poorly.
Yeah, it has caused a lot of strife in a way that it was never meant to cause strife. At least it was never meant
Yeah.
on the Hawaiian side,
Right.
to cause
Right.
strife.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the U.S. government side, well, that's a whole other story. But
Yeah.
there are things in the work right now you can inherit if you're only 25%, but still that's a
Oh.
quarter. I'm an
Yeah.
eighth.
Yeah.
So that still is a problem, but
Yeah.
there are things in the work to get it back down to the very low blood quantum that Prince Kuhio intended.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, fascinating in a sad way, I guess.
I was
Um,
tremendously fascinated by that. I mean, it really
yeah,
opened a whole Pandora's box for me, with
right.
everything, with getting priced out of Kauai, locals getting priced out. They cannot live.
Hmm.
They got to move away. And that brings the
Hmm.
issue of poverty in Hawaii. These are things that, when you go and you visit paradise, this is not what you
Hmm.
know about. This is not what you
No,
see. So I think I found it interesting to me, but I
yeah,
also thought it would be very interested to everybody else to know
yeah,
what's going on,
yeah.
under
Well,
that
and
paradise.
yeah, and what you're talking about is also such a good like I don't know, imagery in thrillers too that works well, is like the here's what you think it is versus like this is what is actually going on. So I feel like it adds
Yeah.
like very thriller-esque tension.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. So Makalani is really complex and emotionally layered. I love that. I
Yay.
prefer that even in my thriller characters. Um, but what inspired like her character and her job as a ranger and like her deep connection as like a daughter of the land?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I knew that if I was going to write this book, that it would have wilderness adventure. Lily Wong was more urban, yeah, urban ninja, but Makalani, that was going to be wilderness. So I wanted a character that had those kinds of skills. So what better skills than a character who's a national park ranger? And then I wanted
Totally.
to make sure she also had some other skills. So I made her a law enforcement national park ranger. So she's got that going on too. But she also grew up on a homestead right on a river, and so she's really familiar with the ocean and the land, and going hunting, and hunting the wild pigs, and hiking all the places, and going up a river and everything. That's all like right in there, part of her. And because she's on a homestead, and also just because she was raised traditionally, she has been taught to care for the land. Malama aina, aina malama. You want to care for the land, and the land will care for you. The other thing that I wanted from Makalani is, and this kind of pulls a little bit from me, and it goes in opposition to Hawaii, which is lazy and laid back, and everything's chill, and chillax and all that. I had way too much energy growing up for the islands. When I went to New
Yeah.
York, I wrote my dance teacher a letter, and I said, I'm finally in a place that has as much energy as me.
Oh, I love that. I love that you found it though.
Yeah, yeah. So, but only then. I wouldn't want to be there now. But, but from Makalani, I wanted her to have that kind of energy. But what it comes out for her is she always wants to work. She's not so terribly comfortable with peers and kids, a little bit, growing up, kind of uncomfortable, way more uncomfortable working, helping, doing, right? Even when people don't want her to work, help too, right? That's a
Right.
really driving force for her.
It, totally. It totally is. The other thing that kind of gets brought up about her is this term that means the wind resisting bush. I'm not going to try to
Oh,
pronounce it because I know I won't do well with it, but I'm sure you can pronounce it. And how did that phrase help shape the story and like kind of ground the story for you?
yeah, yeah. There are a lot of proverbs that are in this particular book, and
Hmm.
that's one of them. And I wish I could pull that up, right from my head. I'm sort of like trying to pull it up even while we're talking. But with her, she's in dire straits at that moment, and she's pulling it up, and she's reminding herself that she has that kind of fortitude, that
Hmm.
she can root herself in the ground, and no matter what's coming at her, including an actual storm, that
Hmm.
she's not going to blow away. She's not going to give up. She's not
Yes.
going to lose ground, that she can
Hmm.
can hold on to that. And
Yeah.
that's what's behind that. And that's a very
Yeah.
big part of how she was raised and who she is.
Yeah. And then you're also touching on there is also this storm looming, which
Yeah.
is like very much also still a physical representation of like the internal conflicts that the characters are going through as well. Did you
Yeah.
know you like always wanted to have that element as well in this story?
Well, yeah, yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing was, it wasn't always called Kaua'i Storm.
Mm.
But, as we were looking for things, then it was like, oh, yeah, we can totally call it Kaua'i Storm because it reflects the emotions, the
Yep.
storm of emotions, but it also affects, like where she's where that ends up. So that was just one of
Mm-hmm.
those things that really worked. When I was starting in my heart, this book was
Mm-hmm.
always called Kuleana, but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, what's that?
Right.
That's not going to really help people understand what kind of book it is,
True.
right? It's like, oh yeah,
True.
Kuleana, what?
Mm-hmm.
And Kuleana, by the way, for people
Yeah,
who
I was gonna
haven't read
ask.
it, it's like a sacred reciprocal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You're like that land, right? You care for
Mm-hmm.
the land cares for you. And Makalani has that sense of responsibility for her family. And so
Yeah,
that's a real big thing.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is also a book where like the location, the setting itself is pretty much a character.
Yeah.
So, how did you go about like choosing like which parts of setting to include and like yeah, how did you build it up like that?
Well, I my son was married. Our eldest
Mm,
son was married in Kauai, so I had been there kind of recently, but
mhm,
before I got the idea to write this book, and that was another reason why I wanted to set it there, and also because of the strong Native Hawaiian community. So when I knew I wanted to do the Hawaiian homelands, there were a couple of communities where that would be likely. And I
mm,
chose Anahola, which is very small. It's just above Kapa'a, which is a very touristy town. Very small touristy town, very
yeah.
local kind of touristy town. And so I knew I wanted to be in Anahola, and I knew I was going to have relatives in Kapa'a, and a lot was going to happen there. And I knew I wanted to travel around the island, so I was going to go down the island and up the opposite coast into the Kokea now state
Mhm.
park. And that's where there's all this wilderness. And as I was looking for, well, where in Kauai State Park do I want to be? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go into the Alikai Swamp because that is so cool. And I want to go to
Mhm.
these lookouts. I want places to be like, really dangerous and adventurous. And so I was looking through all that, and I had friends who actually did the hike that is in this book from Pu'uokila Lookout through the Pihea Trail into Alikai Swamp and like that. So I was like, I had talked to them and got like, this whole insider information for it. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely got to have that in there. And I
Yeah.
wanted to go up the Wailua River. So I did.
Yeah.
I personally enjoyed going up the Wailua River. If you guys ever go visit Kauai, do that. Rent a
Mhm.
paddleboard, rent a kayak, go up the Wailua River, go to Uluvehi Falls. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it had me Googling it, so I can say from Google it's beautiful too. From my landlocked state. So Solomon and Becky also have this really interesting relationship
Mm.
dynamic. So how did you kind of balance how dynamic it is without like kind of like sensationalizing it?
Mm. Well, it's really, I love writing about family and family dynamics, and that's a thing with me. And
Hmm.
so, I really want to keep it real. I want to keep it real. I want to keep it layered.
Hmm.
Uh, Authenticity is like really important to me. So, at the heart of this is she comes home, right, and her two cousins have vanished. They're missing, And one is from one auntie's family and the other is from another auntie's family, and they're at each other's throats. And there's this relationship between them. And I wanted there to be enough between this really vivacious high schooler and this kind of has been, football player, even though there's this change in age and these, cousins kind of removed. And so I wanted there to be enough that the reader is constantly wondering, how is this, whose idea about this relationship is right, whose is maybe off base, and so I keep that going throughout the whole thing, and it ends up being quite, I don't want to say too much, right? But yeah, it was an interesting relationship between them.
I wanted to interrupt this episode really quickly. I have a goal of monetizing Bookwild, but I would love to do it without having to have ads in the podcast. And one way that I can do that is through my Patreon community. For those who don't know, Patreon is a community platform that allows creators to share what they're creating behind a paywall. And so that means exclusive content or early releases. The Bookwild Patreon has 2 tiers. The first tier is the bookish tier, and at that tier you get all of the episodes out a day early, and you get access to our private community chat where we can talk about anything book related or TV shows or movies. The second tier is the Bookwild tier, and it includes everything from the first tier but also Bookwild's backlist book club. So this year I've been wanting to also still read more backlist, even though I read plenty of arcs, and Bookwild's backlist book club felt like the perfect way to do that. We meet on Sundays. We are international right now, so Sundays are the best way to do it. And we meet on Zoom and we all pick a book and we talk about it, and then we talk about everything else we read during the month, and then we pick another book for the next month. So it's been so much fun so far, and we'd love to have you join the book club. So if you'd like to support the Bookwild podcast, you can go to the Patreon link in the show notes and you can sign up for whichever tier interests you. And if you're looking for a free way to support the show, if you can like and review it on whichever platform you listen to, that helps so much. Yeah. It is. It definitely is. And there's also kind of this tension for Makalani as well, because she has her job and what she's allowed to do legally, but without giving it away, because it's not going to spoil any choices she does make, but sometimes she has to make choices of like justice versus law, like, and how they don't line up. So
that's a good
what
way
kind of drew you what drew you to like those elements with like what she had to deal with?
Yeah, I'm big into the gray areas. I don't know anybody who's black and white. I know lots of really great, admirable, good people who make bad choices and do bad things, and I've met some really atrocious people who, on other sides are, so loving to other people or whatever. And so it's very important to me to have a character that is, not pigeonholed into one way or another. She has guiding morality. She has her own sense of priorities, what's important to her. And with Makalani, family comes first. Family will always come first. And so she has to make a lot of her decisions based on that. Yeah, she just does. She just does. She just has to. Yeah, I always, what you're talking about with like that gray area, I think that's always fun. Yeah. In the context of a thriller too, because as a reader, like you're just like, just do the more gray leaning thing. Like just do it. Yeah. So I feel like it sometimes helps remind us like it's easier than you think to like make a questionable decision because we're all motivated by so many different things. Oh yeah. Or you could just like lose your mindfulness in a moment and just do
Yeah.
something that you're like, what was I thinking?
Right.
So sometimes there's that, and sometimes there are really choices where you're like,
Hmm.
well, I'm going to do it anyway, right? And I
Right.
think we all make those kinds of choices. I like
So true.
universal. Um, I like to touch into those things that
Hmm.
we all do. So even though this is a family that is, all sorts of these ethnic things with, the
Hmm.
predominant Hawaiian running through it, it's all universal themes: coming home,
Hmm.
dealing with families, dealing with, all of that kind of stuff, sisters, aunties, cousins,
Hmm.
expectation, identity. Who
Yes.
doesn't have that going on, right? We
Right.
all do.
Totally. Yeah. That kind of brings me to my other question about like family and ohana is what it's called in this context. Um, it's a multi-generational story. We have like very complex relationships between each person and their families. And it sounds like from what you said, like the genealogy at the beginning was what was important for you to have a grasp of. So what made you so sure that like that needed to be a part of it, like multiple generations?
Well, it actually is a big subplot in and of itself.
Right.
There is a huge story element that is completely entwined into
Hmm.
that genealogy and that family history, and so that's why it,
Yeah.
it played
Yeah.
such an important part. And in my
Hmm.
genealogy, I mean, like when I
Hmm.
when I do all that at home, because what's in the book you just see, nice and clean, right? Mine
Right.
has all the percentages of whatever ethnicity is going on. So you
Oh wow.
get, so it begins with Makalani's great grandmother, right? So
Hmm.
when you come down to cousins who are two generations younger than Makalani,
Hmm.
um, they have, like 10 different ethnicities, and the percentages are,
Yeah.
are like this, right? I have that all figured out. That's in my spreadsheet. I didn't put that in
Wow.
there, but I know exactly how much Korean you got with your
Yeah.
Portuguese and your Filipino and your I know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Hmm.
influences the kind of cultures that come in, you know.
Right. I bet.
So I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, and Norwegian, and
Mm.
yet my parents met and married in Japan, where both of my sisters were born. So Japanese is also a huge culture in my
Wow.
family culture, you know.
Yeah.
So everybody in Hawaii has these different things, you know. Only in
Hmm.
Hawaii do you actually go up to somebody and say, "Oh yeah, what are you?" And nobody takes offense, because we're all interested.
Right. Right. It's not a demeaning question.
No,
It's
no, no, no. We
curiosity.
all want to
Yeah.
know, because, by the
Yeah.
way, we might have family.
Hmm. Yes. I love that. Was there anything intimidating about writing this after spending so much time with Lucy Wong? Was it a different experience?
Oh, with Lily Wong.
Or sorry, Lily. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
it's a very different book. Kaua'i Storm
Yeah.
is a very different kind of book.
Mhm.
As you were saying it's mystery, but so much more, right?
Mhm.
There's family life drama. There's I mean, and a lot of, the sense of place and things. Of course there's this mystery, of course there's this adventure, but it's also woven in with some, traditions and mythology of Hawaii. It even has Hawaiian language written
Mhm.
into the prose and into some of the dialogue. So it has all those things going. Lily Wong was not like that. To
Mhm.
begin with, it was all written in the first person.
Right.
Very
Yeah.
different, very different. That was
Mhm.
that was a
Yeah, that makes a big
very
difference.
action oriented modern day ninja with
Mhm.
family Joy Luck Club family issues. That's how I
Mhm.
always
Right.
thought of her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you can't tell, I loved Kaua'i Storm.
Yay.
I was so cool. I love when people can incorporate so much into still a thriller, because I just have pacing problems and I just want things to still be happening. So
Yeah.
I love when there's more going on, but it's still a thriller.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
I keep track of that as from my screenwriting
Oh,
ways.
yeah.
I'm used to that kind of pacing. I'm used to like
Hmm.
taking these different subplots and regulating them so that we don't forget anybody. And I actually
Yeah.
write in Scrivener where I can see a binder full of all my chapters and stuff, and I
Yes.
color code it so that I know how
Ooh.
long it's been since I've been with this character or that theme or that
Yes.
subplot or action versus family, so that I can,
Yeah.
keep that, that pace and that enthusiasm, that energy going.
Yes. Yes, I love that. I am doing something similar in Scrivener right now. So I'm so
Woo!
happy to hear that it's good to use for that direction,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah, the color coding makes sense, because I basically I kind of wrote the backstories, but now I want them to intertwine. So I'm going through that, like, where should this chapter go? And kind of what you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, that is what I'm thinking about, is
yeah.
like, have they forgotten about this because it was like 4 chapters
And
ago?
it's really great because in Scrivener you can see all those things in the
Yeah.
chapter. So when I finish writing, then I put it into a Word document. But
Hmm.
then I can search words, keywords to find things. But it's
Right.
easier to just also pull up the Scrivener and look at the
Yes.
chapters. And then like I just finished the second book, the book that comes after Kaua'i Storm.
Ooh,
Ooh, it's set on the Big Island of
nice.
Hawaii. And
Hmm.
I had to do some real restructuring, and so I started moving things a lot, bringing things forward, adding things. And so
Hmm.
I had both things open. I had the Word doc open and I had the Scrivener open, and I did all of that structural stuff
Mm,
there, and then I
yeah,
changed it in the Word because I knew where to find it.
that's
Yeah,
nice. That's
really
awesome.
helpful.
And I'm excited that there's another one. Do you read a lot? I always ask at the
Mm.
end if there's anything you've read that you loved lately.
Oh yeah, I read all the time. I mean, as a
Yeah,
kid, right? I just lived in books. Now I'm
me
always
too.
reading one thing and listening to something else. I love audiobooks because I
Yes,
can listen while I'm cooking, while I'm exercising, everything,
yes.
hiking, whatever. Um, a book set in Hawaii that I loved is Hula
Okay.
from Jasmine Iolani Hakes. So I
Okay.
highly recommend that. If you're into historical, I love Alan Brennert's books as well. So that would be like a Hawaii thing. If
Yeah.
mystery, I love Lisa Gardner. She's got this
Oh
new
yeah.
Frankie Elkins
And mm-hmm.
series, and the third one is actually set in an atoll of the Hawaiian Islands. And
Whoa,
so
that's
if you
cool.
like, Lisa Gardner and you like this Frankie Elkins, yeah, chances are you're probably going to like Kaua'i Storm. Very different, but
Yeah.
you'll probably like it. And I'm reading
Hmm.
her fourth book right now. I don't think it's quite been released, but really
Hmm.
great. I love
Nice.
J.T. Ellison.
Oh
She's
yeah.
she's a go-to author for me. She's coming out with a new book.
Hmm.
I'm going to read it. So
Yes.
that's just how it is, right? So that's just
Yeah,
a
she's
few to name.
amazing. Yeah, those are some great recommendations. Where can people follow you to stay up to date on everything?
Ooh, my favorite. I'm on a lot of social media. My favorite is Instagram, and so
Same.
that is writer.tori. Writer as in author, not writer as in motorcycle rider.
Right.
You'd be surprised.
Writer.
You'd be surprised how many people get that one wrong.
I'm sure. I'm
Mm.
sure.
So I love that, and then
Yeah.
I'll post on Facebook. I like
Mhm.
my personal profile better, Tori M. Eldridge, but I have an author page too, Tori Eldridge author. I'm on TikTok. I'm
Nice.
more so now. I'm really into these on location Kauai. That's my hashtag, on loc
Ooh.
Kauai Storm. On
Yeah.
location videos. I've been posting a lot and I'm going to continue to post a lot. And they
Okay.
take you to all the different locations and I'm talking and I'm telling you like behind the scenes
That is so
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, it's been super fun. They will all show up on Instagram. They'll
Hmm.
show up on TikTok because they're videos. I'll put them on Facebook. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
on Threads, but not all that
Yeah.
much. And I
Hmm.
have a YouTube channel. If you just go at Tori Eldridge, you'll find tons of videos and stuff. But
Nice. Love that.
and if you like book clubs, go to my
Hmm.
website because in my for readers section, I have a
Hmm.
book club for Kaua'i Storm that's got all
Oh,
sorts of fun
good.
stuff.
Man, you have all the good
I
links.
got all the good links. I got all the fun stuff.
You really do. Well, I
I
will put
enjoy it.
all of you. I know, I can tell. Not everyone does, so it is fun when people like enjoy that part of social media. Um, so yeah, I will put all of those links in the show notes if any
Oh,
of that is
fun.
interesting to people. And otherwise, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Oh gosh, this has been a blast. Thanks for making my day.